everybody. Welcome. I hope you had a delicious lunch. I'm Henry again from Mayor Peduto's office, the Small Business and Neighborhood Revitalization Coordinator. I'm really happy to introduce this lunchtime panel. I'm going to get out from in front of the speaker. So here, the project we're going to talk about today is called the Dairy District. It's in Carrick. It's along Brownsville Road, which is one of the oldest roads in Pittsburgh, extending to the south. The dairy in question is the Coulter-Yon Dairy. It's the only dairy still operating in the city of Pittsburgh, and that was one of the most prominent features on that portion of Brownsville Road. So the team that's about to speak is going to explain how they used an existing asset to help create a larger identity that would help bring positive attention to a place that hadn't had much attention as of late. Our panelists today are Chris Koch from the Design Center of Pittsburgh, Jason Tagano from Economic Development South, ASHLEIGH DEEMER from Councilwoman Rudiak's office, Chip Desmone from Desmone Architects, and Carolyn Krachowski from the Carrick Community Council. I hope I didn't screw up your name. Awesome. So I'm going to hand it off to Chris. She'll be moderating the discussion. I hope you all enjoy it, and we'll have an opportunity for some questions a little bit later. And I hope you're enjoying yourselves today at the 2016 Pittsburgh Blight Boot Camp. Here you go, Chris.
Thank you.
There's that for you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Oh boy, this is going to be interesting. My name is Chris Koch. I'm from Design Center Pittsburgh, and we're going to be talking a little bit about, as Henry said, the Dairy District. Is that better? All right. I think that's better. Okay, thank you. They wanted me to mention that if anybody's interested in the Blight doctors, they are available now in front of the registration table, so you can take this time to go out there and get your Blight crisis taken care of, or get some emergency help with your Blight issue with the Blight doctors that are outside. So please take that opportunity to go out and talk to them if you want to during this time. I'm going to start with just by asking Jason Tagano from Economic Development South to talk a little bit about the Dairy District, so you can get a full idea of what the whole project really entails.
Thanks, Chris. So the first thing to say is Brownsville Road is an extremely long road when you think about a Main Street district. It encompasses 3 separate municipalities, and there's approximately 22,000 cars a day that travel on it. For a small Main Street business district, it gets a lot of traffic. The unfortunate thing is oftentimes that traffic doesn't stop and get out of the car. So one thing that we wanted to do in partnership with Councilwoman Rudiak's office was really inspect the neighborhood for assets that we could use for redevelopment purposes. The Coulter-Yon Dairy has existed for over 100 years, and about 100 years ago there were about 300 dairies within the city of Pittsburgh. Today there is one, and it is the Coulter-Yon Dairy. We felt that that was something worth celebrating, the fact that we still make things in the city of Pittsburgh, the fact that there is a sort of local makers growth market here that we can still capitalize on. Right next to the dairy was a vacant lot that used to be a chop shop. The city demolished that building, and it just sat vacant for a number of years. In working with the community, one of the other things that we discovered is that access to good and healthy food was something that they were very concerned about. So streamlining this all together into a concept idea, working with the community, with Councilwoman Rudiak's office, we really looked at this as a multi-phased project. The first phase is that we could construct a farmer's market that would be on Brownsville Road, that would provide that food access that the community is looking for. In addition, we sort of beefed it up a little bit to allow for its use in other community events as a broader gathering space. This is all right next to the dairy, which, if there are slides going, it is a giant white building made out of metal that you wouldn't really know was a dairy unless you actually were from the neighborhood and knew that the dairy was there. So with the lot as the phase 1 for the farmer's market, the idea was to really expand that district. The dairy runs about 1.5 blocks on either side of the street. In trying to open up some of the vacant buildings there to create more of a broader dairy-themed district that might have a grilled cheese restaurant, that might have an ice cream store, just trying to be creative with different types of retail uses that could be coupled along with a dairy district or having the dairy itself there, as well as doing dairy events on the market site. So we would do the world's largest ice cream sundae, or for our grand opening, we brought out a couple of cows. And how many times do you get cows in the city of Pittsburgh? That opening brought about 300 residents. The kids loved it. It was really an exciting idea. But just, and we can obviously get into this a lot more, but just how, you know, the idea of building upon a small piece can build on a broader concept to really re-envision what a broader section of a neighborhood really could be, with a jumping off point of something that's really small and not that it's totally feasible, but it's something that someone could do with not a great deal of work. The pavilion was a good bit of work, but at the same time, we're not totally recreating the entire neighborhood with the first piece. It just sets that foundation that we can then build upon as the community gears up, as we gear up as a nonprofit organization working with the city. So all in all, it was been a very fantastic process. The design center was amazingly effective and instrumental in the design, making sure that the community actually got what they wanted to see out of the project. And it has been open for 4 months now, and it's been a really great success, and we're looking forward to many more events there. So I will turn it back to Chris at this point.
Thank you so much. So that's the overview, and you'll see pictures of different stages we're going to talk about during this talk. I wanted each person to think about their organization they're coming from and just what the role was of your specific organization within the project itself. And I'll start here with ASHLEIGH.
Sure. So I'm ASHLEIGH DEEMER. I'm Chief of Staff for Councilwoman Natalia Rudiak. You know, this project really truly started with a conversation between the Councilwoman and Economic Development South. In a way, our partnership has been unconventional in that the Councilwoman and Economic Development South were coming up together. Economic Development South was new to Carrick, and the Councilwoman was just in her first term on council. And so this really was the idea of both organizations. And so in that way, our engagement in the process was from the very beginning. So there was no formal way that EDS came to us and said, hey, please champion this project. It just was kind of natural in that way. But over the years, our office has helped facilitate public engagement in the process to make sure that the designs and the plans for the block, the dairy district, were in keeping with what the neighborhood wanted to see. We also have championed funding for from the city's coffers as well as other funding sources. We can kind of stand up and say that we represent the community and we would like to see grants funded and things like that. So we have a little bit of leverage as well with the city budget, which I can talk about. I think there's another question related to that, but we can talk more about that. But so we've brought some resources to the project, we've brought some community engagement to the process, and we've really tried to make sure that this project is in the public eye. Anytime people ask us about Carrick, anytime reporters come to us specifically about what's happening in Carrick, we highlight this project and make sure that that story is told. A lot of the role that the Councilwoman has played across South Pittsburgh is helping people remember that it's there, because honestly, a lot of people in South Pittsburgh feel that Carrick and other neighborhoods have been out of sight, out of mind for a long time. And so a lot of what we do is talking to investors, talking to developers, talking to foundations, talking to the media, and telling that story. So that's the role I feel we've played.
I think that's a really good point. And we'll talk a little bit more about the role of your council person, but I think talking about storytelling and having the person who is going to go beyond the neighborhood boundaries to tell that story and to talk to a larger region about a project like this only gets you more resources. So we'll dive into that a little bit. Jason, can you talk a little bit about Economic Development South's role and the role of a CDC?
So Economic Development South is a multi-municipal CDC. We work across 16 different independent municipalities or city neighborhoods. So we're a little bit more unique than traditional CDCs. But really, our role is that would be the same as any neighborhood CDC. Because we're a nonprofit organization, we're able to apply for funding to foundations and the government. I will recognize you, help me remember, beyond the City of Pittsburgh and Councilwoman Rudiak's office, the mayor has supported this project with funding. We got a large grant from the Hillman Foundation as well to really drive this project forward. But EDS played the role. We own the property, we own the land. That was sort of a case of but for. So without someone taking ownership of the land and actually covering the utilities, the taxes, the liability insurance, the city really does not want to do that anymore. So if you want to do these types of projects, you need an organization that is prepared to own land. That does come with a certain amount of responsibility. But it is that sort of thing that we've recognized needs to be done in neighborhoods. And that really is what we see our role being. If we can't find other owners, then we need to do that. So, and then sort of project managing, construction management, working with Desmond Architects, being out at the site, just making sure that the construction goes well, that the project actually materializes in the way that it was designed and drawn to do. So it's really, you know, from start to finish, I would say probably our project more than anyone else's, but clearly there was a team behind this, and we could not have done this without the Councilwoman's office, Desmond Architects, our construction group. PW Campbell was very flexible with us in sort of this unique concept of a design, but it's understanding that without Economic Development South as the main pusher on this with great partners, that this work would not have been done. So as a community group, you need to realize that it's really on you, and working with those folks and those stakeholders around in your community to really garner support to see these projects through, because they're not easy and they don't happen overnight.
So before we go on to the next person, I'll just say a little bit about the Design Center's role. The Design Center is a nonprofit that helps communities access design and planning services. Our role in this project was to bring technical assistance and grant dollars to the design and planning phase, and to help the community tackle physical space and the built environment as part of this project. And through that process, one of the things we do is help communities find the right expertise in their design and planning partners, and for us, that end up being Desmond Architects. So I want to pass it on to Chip and have him talk a little bit about the role that Desmond played in this project.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks for inviting me today. Desmond, as Chris said, Desmond Architects was hired by the Community Design Center to be the architect for what is essentially their client, which is Economic Development South and Natalia Rudiak in the city, and the community of Carrick as well. So the first part of the project for us is really just spending a lot of time listening to what the goals of the project are from Community Design Center's point of view, from the Councilwoman's point of view, from Economic Development South's point of view, as well as, you know, what specifically the neighbors wanted to see created in this district. And so we spent a lot of time really just the first several meetings just kind of listening and trying to collect as much information about their goals for the project as we possibly could, and then bringing back thoughts and ideas about how we could proceed. Really, before we even got to the pavilion on the vacant lot, we kind of created a broader visioning plan for the district area itself, and kind of created what we thought were an approach to how the design of this specific neighborhood would work. And then that pavilion kind of came out of and evolved out of that plan that we created, some of which you're seeing drawings up here that we did. And that's really how it got started and evolved into what became the pavilion project.
And then last but finally not least, Carolyn, can you talk about the role of the Carrick Community Council through this project?
Well, as you keep hearing over and over, people are mentioning community engagement. And one of the things, being an organization with members of Carrick and being, you know, around people at our different events, seeing them at the grocery store, we're always getting feedback on different projects, things that people would like. So at Carrick Community Council, one of the main things that we did was just make sure that we engaged as much of the community as we could. You know, there's certainly people, I'm sure, out there that know the same community people that you see at each event, and we wanted to reach beyond that. So we looked and said, okay, maybe we don't see anyone here from the schools or that have children in the schools. Let's reach out and remind them that there's a meeting coming up. And so that's one of the things that we did, is just try to get a really good example of everybody's needs and what it would meet for them, so that we could kind of get feedback and pass that along.
I'm going to hand the mic right back to you in a minute. So one of the things you'll see in a lot of the renderings that were the community's vision for this project is a lot of cows and cow prints thrown into this destination. And one of my favorite things was this plan was always called Cowtastic by the community, and I think you can see that. The idea is to, you know, not only infuse the dairy idea through the corridor, but the dairy itself is going to have a cow print on it, probably in a few months or in the spring when it gets painted. So you're going to drive by and see this huge cow dairy sitting there. I wanted to talk a little bit, Carolyn, how important is the community history and the identity of the community in a project like this, and how did that really play into the vision of the district as it emerged?
I think a lot of times when you think about development, you think, oh, I want to have this here, I want to have this here. But you really, you know, that's part of the discussion, but you really want to stop and take a step and say, what do we already have? What is awesome about our neighborhood? And one of the things, of course, as was mentioned, we had a dairy in Carrick, in the city. It's working. I mean, that was kind of amazing, and a lot of people didn't know that. So it's definitely ideas like that that make your neighborhood unique, and that really, you know, for 100 years that it's been operating, you know, what a rich history. You know, I would think that they're not going to get up and leave. They've been a part of it. The person, you know, that have been the residents, their parents remember it. We heard stories when we talked about the dairy district. Oh, you know, my parents used to go up there and get milk. They used to go up and you could just ring the buzzer and you get it. It just brings out so many great stories about the community when you really tie it to some historic relevance to everyone. So you know, history is a huge part of it, just to kind of get that buy-in from everybody and just get people talking and get them excited about it.
I think you're right as far as storytelling. One of the things that really struck me was the conversation that came out of this, that this was the last dairy out of 300 and something like a few thousand in the whole county. And that, you know, there was a history that was lost in most of the city, but luckily Carrick still has that. And I think that's an important story to tell as part of this larger project. But I wanted to talk to Economic Development South. You know, this project is part of a destination for the district, but it's also part of a larger vision of Brownsville Road. And Jason, can you really talk about what can communities do to sort of tie in these kind of projects to a larger regional effort, and why is that an important thing to do?
Absolutely. So, you know, when we're looking at Brownsville Road, we're looking at ultimately an economic market. And like I mentioned earlier, there's about 22,000 cars that travel on our road every day. Those are business opportunities for retailers. Those are residential opportunities for neighborhoods and municipalities. The idea that the work that we do ties back into that market strategy that blends in with what the existing neighborhood already wants is tremendously important. Understanding your population and who the folks are that you're trying to serve in that neighborhood is important. We are working to try to build new housing, bring new apartments, affordable senior apartment buildings to the neighborhood, as well as we have a large immigrant population that we're trying to be very mindful of that is growing in our neighborhoods. So as we're doing this redevelopment work, having destinations that provide the resources that the community needs, right? The pavilion offers a farmer's market, but it's also a space where our Bhutanese and Nepalese immigrants can have a craft fair or a maker's fair of interesting international wares that don't already exist in the community is something that would draw people from other neighborhoods, would draw people from other communities, which is ultimately, I think, what we're trying to do in redevelopment efforts of our neighborhoods, is trying to make these cool, funky places that people want to check out, that are worth going to and worth spending their time at. It's worth pulling over, getting out of your car, and walking into a store, right? As crazy as that is in some neighborhoods, it doesn't happen at all in others. And so understanding what market factors drive it, understand what community factors drive it, and sort of the broader circle of the regionalism, right? Because you know, part of the reason why neighborhoods are successful is that outsiders go in and check it out and then leave again and come back another day and check it out again and spend their money and then go back home. And so the idea that we can make this a draw for others to come and check out and see a giant white building with cow print on it, right? Yeah, that's not something you see every day. And being quirky and thoughtful about what makes our neighborhoods authentically unique, right? That history is so important to our residents, and drawing on that really is what keeps it vibrant and alive in an authentic way that we think people would appreciate.
It's my hope that the cow building keeps evolving and eventually has like horns and a snout, so it actually looks like a cow. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was, unfortunately, Culture Yon couldn't be here today because they're obviously making their amazing chocolate milk and their really good iced tea, which Henry wanted me to remind people is very good and everybody should get some. Jason, can you talk a little bit about the role of a private company like Culture Yon that's also, you know, an anchor institution, and what really motivated them to be a partner as part of this project?
I think a private company has a couple of opportunities with private development like this. First is sort of marketing, PR, and growth. This really, if you frame it the right way, this is a great opportunity for Culture Yon to get a lot of free or low-cost advertising, right? By partnering with us in our work and the councilwoman's work and the community's work and everybody's work in highlighting the dairy. Thousands, tens of thousands of people are now aware that there's only one dairy left in the city of Pittsburgh when there used to be 300. And so I think that has been a big boost to them, as well as the sort of that latent spill off of, as we get new residents and new folks coming into the pavilion, as we open up new restaurants and do other things. Ultimately, it raises real estate values, it raises property values, it makes the land around there worth more money, which ultimately is dollars and investment back into the company, right? If their land is worth more than their assets are worth more. And so there's, I think, a couple of different layers of ways that companies, private companies, can benefit out of partnering with redevelopment, CDCs, community groups, local elected officials, to really elevate the neighborhood and make it a broader draw for people. Candidly, I think that our local businesses are really the tip of the spear in that. If you're driving down a road, the first thing you see are the retail businesses on the road. If they don't look nice, you're probably not going to stop your car, get out and shop. If they don't look nice, you're probably not turning off of that main road back into the neighborhood and looking for a place to live. So to really have a good partnership with our local businesses, to really have them participating as anchors in the project, not only benefit the project itself, but benefit the business and their opportunities to make money, which is why they exist. So if we can consider that in our development, then it becomes a win-win for the business as well as for the community.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the one thing that really strikes me about this project too is just Culture Yon's commitment to the community. Their story is the community's story, and the ability, you know, when you talk to them about this project and you see them at events and they talk about their history, just the pride they have. It's a family business and generations, and how it's also a history of the neighborhood, and the ability that this project gave them the platform to do that, and sort of not only remind the community but remind themselves in a way. Like, they were constantly telling stories that they had sort of even lost as a company. And I think anytime, you know, I think we talk enough about corporate responsibility, but I think those groups are out there still, and I think we have to find them sometimes in our neighborhoods and give them those platforms to be able to be part of these projects. So I think that was an amazing, you know, thing to really reach out to them and bring them into this. I wanted to talk a little bit with ASHLEIGH about, you know, a lot of people always come to us, and I'm sure to a lot of you as well, say, how do we work with our council person? What kind of resources can they bring to the project? How do we sort of engage them? And so, Ashley, can you talk a little bit about what's the best way to really do that in a neighborhood?
Yeah, sure. Hi. So obviously every council person is different. So you want to get to know your council person and understand what role they take on in the community, because again, council is really what you make it, right? So, but from my perspective, I would suggest, I think one of the major questions people always have is when to engage their council person. Do you come with a fully fledged idea, or do you get them involved earlier? And I would say earlier is better. I mean, this is true for everyone. You know, when you get someone in on the ground floor of an idea and they play a part in helping build that idea, they feel ownership over it, they feel pride about it. And the same is true for council people. So in our case, Councilwoman Rudiak was, at the table from the very start. And so this was on the tip of her tongue everywhere she went. And anytime we looked at the city budget and anytime there was a grant opportunity, she was thinking about the Carrick Dairy District. And that's the relationship you want to cultivate with your council person. In terms of actual mechanisms by which you reach out to your council person, there are so many different ways. Again, it's very specific to the district that you're in, but for example, our office is at just about every community meeting you can think of that's public in the neighborhood, and so you can always approach your council person face-to-face or their staff face-to-face at a meeting. Don't be shy about calling your council person's office and asking for a meeting to talk through an idea. That's what they're there for, and you should take every advantage of that. I would also say, in terms of resources, there's sometimes a misconception that the city has a pot of money to just pay for projects outright. And the reality is that the city's budget is limited. There's a whole long history there, right? But the city's had its share of difficulties, financial difficulties, and we have very limited dollars that we can put into projects like this. But when there is grant money being matched, when there's private funding in for projects, we can play a very specific role in funding parts of the project that are specifically in the public right-of-way. So with this project, with the broader visioning for the project, there's a lot of streetscape work. There's a lot of reimagining of how to use that space in the roadway. So, the city very often devotes planning dollars to redesigning that public space, devotes capital dollars to rebuilding sidewalks and repaving roads and putting in crosswalks and things like that. And so we can devote actual dollars to that for contract work or in-kind work in terms of actually building it with our public works professionals. So with the pavilion, for example, the city did pay for the sidewalks and the plantings around the pavilion. And that's how we can play a role. We very seldomly pay for a project in its entirety, but we can play a very specific role. So I would say, again, engage early and often. Keep your council person in mind every step of the way, and they will support you back. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always surprised when I talk to people that people don't realize that they can call their council person and just meet with them. I think people think that that's not something they're supposed to do. So we encourage that all the time because, obviously if you're just getting something started or just want to have a dialogue, just make an appointment. The easiest way to get started. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the Urban Redevelopment Authority, city planning, and the mayor's office played huge roles in this project. Not only did they provide funding for our design piece, they also provided a lot of funding and spent a lot of their staff time helping us, basically navigate, the sidewalks, the site itself, ownership issues, funding sources. So, they were hugely involved in this project, and I think the councilwoman's office was really great in helping us not only navigate that, but sort of, figure out who to go talk to and how to sort of deal with all the different people that we had to. So did Economic Development South. So I think that's a role that you want to make sure you're involving your council person because they can help you navigate those city systems whenever you need to. And I want to talk a little bit about our the design piece. So Chip, if you could talk a little bit about what is the role of design in community redevelopment, and what kind of expertise did you really bring to this process, and why was it needed very early on?
Thanks, Chris. Couple things. We've had a long history of community development projects. Our office in Lawrenceville was a community design center project 24 years ago, back when it was the first one. So yeah, so when you think about Lawrenceville today, you think about this highly successful neighborhood that's going gangbusters. But what most people don't remember is that 24 years ago, it was one of the scariest neighborhoods in the city, and a very, very dangerous place. And the Community Design Center, along with the local CDC at the time, which was Lawrenceville Development Corporation, and the mayor's office in the URA, along with some foundation funding, convinced everybody that this building in Doughboy Square was worth saving. It had no roof at the time, no windows or anything. And it ultimately became the catalyst for what was the redevelopment of an entire neighborhood. So really all it takes is just the determination of one community activist to marshal all the people that need to come together to do this. And you're just seeing 5 people up here talk about Carrick district, but in Carrick, just like in Lawrenceville, it takes literally dozens of people who are determined to rid a neighborhood of blight to make it happen. So, it takes kind of a group vision that coalesces around an idea to bring about a quality design that will help transform a neighborhood. And it's really kind of been my experience in my career to help facilitate a neighborhood through change. And we've done that in most, I would say, literally dozens of neighborhoods across the city and the county and in Western Pennsylvania through this process. And without the design put together, without that concept, that group concept fleshed out through a process of engagement and listening and producing ideas kind of on a large scale and trying to narrow everything down to a concept that you can take as a group and actually sell to larger stakeholders who could bring funding to bear, you really can't make it happen. So like I said, it just takes a large group of people to buy into a vision, to direct the design team to come up with specific ideas that they can take to the council, the mayor's office, the URA, and the larger community to buy into this vision. So making the pretty pictures is really what helps sell it in the end. And I think some of these things up here were what really helped us gain traction and funding with sources outside of just Economic Development South and CDC. And this particular project, now I'm going to go a little bit more off of my soapbox, but I wanted to say that for me personally, this project was a lot of fun because I, as the senior person in my office now, I don't really get to play in this realm very much anymore. And on this project, I personally got to actually draw again and do neat things like that, which I hadn't done in years. And so I've just found it a lot of fun to do. And drawing those cow patches on the building was a lot of fun, and creating the gateway and doing those drawings was just a blast for me personally. And it just, I think, helped get my office really engaged in a way that was kind of exciting for us, and really helped enroll the entire office in helping to create something really unique and special for what is a unique and special neighborhood. So thank you.
That's a really good point. I think something we often miss, because there's, in many communities, there's so much around blight that is negative. And it is right, it should be. It's a terrible thing to have to look at every day and live around every day. But when you do get those wins, to celebrate them and to try to have fun during the process. You know, the one thing I loved about every community meeting had chocolate milk. You just couldn't show up and be sad when there was all this great chocolate milk in the back of the room. And that was, you know, really thanks to Culture. But you know, just having the celebration at the space when it opened, at the plaza and the pavilion and all that. I think those things are really important for a community to have when you get those wins, to really celebrate them and talk about them. We want to dive a little bit, or I want to dive a little bit into talking to everybody about some of the nuts and bolts of some of these projects. You know, one thing that I always used to get frustrated when I heard a panel is they never tell you what were the wins, what were the losses, like what really worked, what really didn't work, and how did you get past those barriers, because you're going to hit them, every project does. And I just want to ask the whole panel if anybody can think about anything that was a real opportunity that you seized, or a real barrier that we pushed through during the project, and how that sort of came about. How did you get through it? If anybody has any ideas.
So, you know, one of the early issues that we had is we had several different designs done that the community had informed folks on. And a lot of them, I would say, some of them were around what I'll say are perceived issues as opposed to real issues. You know, one of the big things that the community wanted to see a lot of was actually parking, which on one hand is needed in neighborhoods, and we understand that. On the other hand, when we're dealing with a specific site that has, you know, a certain square footage, using some of that for temporary parking may not be the highest and best use of that site. So we had a little bit of community pushback. We did sort of work through that. There really is not any parking on the site. What was proposed parking is actually green space, which I'm very excited about, because when the market is in use, it's a nice little area for folks to sit down and maybe eat something, or for kids to run and play on. It did get a lot of use from the neighborhood, much more, I think, than it would have from 2 or 3 cars just sitting on it and really holding up space. So really trying to think through what the end use and the end goal of a project really is important, because there can be those perceptions of, oh, it would be nice to have parking here. Well, on our lot, we could have had 3 spaces, and, you know, 3 spaces at a farmer's market site really isn't going to change the quality of that site in the same way that having that as passive green space that can be activated for a multitude of uses throughout the time was really a better use for it. So off the top of my head, that would be one, is just really trying to think of really that end-to-end use and what you really need to get out of that, as opposed to trying to cram 50 things into one site because we want to try to get a little bit of everything into something. You know, really let the project be what the project is, because you know, 1, parking isn't really, I think, as big an issue as much as people would like it to be. And 2, there are plenty of other places we can put parking if we really needed to, if it is that much of a concern.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Some of the original designs had a large part of it was a paved area for a driveway or parking, and it would have changed the project a lot. And I think the good point is how I think the partnership put their heads together, and one of the solutions was to work with the city to close down the side street on days when there's an event or when there's a market, so that, you know, the market people can still pull up, but it obviously does not change the site design. And I think that was a great solution to try to, you know, you want to solve as much as you can the parking issue, but not use a lot of space as hardscape if you can help it. So I think that was really good. Did you have one that you thought?
Yeah, I mean, thinking more broadly, as Chip said, this dairy district concept started out with a broader visioning process for a whole block of Carrick's Brownsville Road. So we were looking at everything from the streetscape to storefronts and what they would look like, and a color palette and street furniture and lighting. And so much of that is not in our control. These are privately owned buildings, and ultimately, you know, it's kind of our job to make the case that property owners can feel safe investing and making these upgrades to their properties, and they will, you know, bring new businesses to the block, and they will bring new customers. And so rather than waiting for someone else to take that first step and make that first investment, I really do think this pavilion was in a way the way to convince everybody else that this is real and that they should invest. So this was a vacant lot that we had site control of, and EDS and our office and Desmond made the most of it, right? So you have to choose that low-hanging fruit and just move forward. And you know, the process continues, right? That is phase one, and we hope that that'll, again, make the case to everyone else that they can safely invest and things will keep going the way we've said they will. So I think that was an opportunity, and a barrier, you know, again, is kind of that bureaucratic side of it. This is why things take time, right? Like the negotiations about who would hold the property at the pavilion. Would it be the city? Would it be Economic Development South? Who would hold the insurance on that property? Who would maintain the property? These are all conversations that you don't necessarily think about when you're initially dreaming of what a space could be, but they're very necessary and they take time. And so just understanding that up front and knowing that you'll have to go there is a good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. You know, when you're having fun thinking about what are we going to put here, you're not thinking about, wow, how am I going to maintain this later, right? But it's something we always bring up in our design phase because, you know, the design and build phase is a small part of what the maintenance is going to be forever. So, Jason, can you talk a little bit about what is next for the Dairy District itself and what kind of work EDS is doing on Brownsville Road in general?
So there's a couple of different phases to this project, and then within the phases, there are phases. So phase one of the project was the actual market pavilion itself. There is a phase two to the market pavilion. We have to complete the rear of the site, and we are also lobbying very heavily to acquire an additional piece of property that is adjacent to it that would allow us to expand the site. It would mostly be passive green space and gardening, but as a community amenity, we think that that's really important, and it's something that we've been advocating for a while. So hopefully those things will be done in the spring of 17. As for the additional site, or the additional project, we want to paint the dairy. We're right now also in conversation about a unique bus stop out there, just to sort of further complement that. Those are two shorter term projects. Ultimately, we're in discussions with the Coulter-Yons, who own, I want to say, about 95% of both of the other side of the blocks, about what sort of opportunities would best be available for them as well. Fortunately and unfortunately, as was mentioned earlier, we don't actually own a lot of the buildings that we're trying to work on. So we have to sort of be mindful what would be best for the Coulter-Yons. If you're not aware, we weren't initially until we started this. We've learned quite a bit about the dairy business, and apparently the margins are really thin. It's a really difficult business to be in, and that's why lots of dairies have closed down over the last number of years. So we are trying to be very cognizant of what we can both do for the Coulter-Yons themselves to improve their facilities and what it is that they're trying to do, as well as bringing other retail opportunities to that specific corridor, again, around an ice cream shop, a grilled cheese shop, just different sort of conceptual ideas that would have to do with dairy that could be really cool. In addition to that, we're working strategically on a couple of things. One is retail along Brownsville Road. We've been working with business owners in the area to do facade and grant improvements, pop-up storefronts, just different things in small scale to sort of try to activate the business district as much as possible. We're also working on a couple of housing plans. There's one under construction now that I think is about $16 million. It'll be 66 new units of senior housing, mostly affordable. We're very excited about that. That's some of the first new construction we've had in the neighborhood in about 2 decades. We're in the process of hopefully redeveloping another major property that was quite a blight and eyesore to the neighborhood. That should be happening probably within the next 6 months. So really strategically, again, targeting commercial retail at a very low level, and then trying to think about redeveloping the real assets in the neighborhood that are much larger scale, and sort of bridging those two pieces of development is sort of a trajectory line of ours, especially within the Carrick Brownsville Road corridor.